Quite a couple questions I had and a bit of new information that I want to go over on engine sizes that you guys can go to if you have a little bit of ingenuity. One of the guys was asking me, how big can I go without having a machine shop open up my case? And well, I'll tell you a few things that I know, and there's some things that I can't tell you unless we look at the case itself. But I've got a friend that took a 76 millimeter counterweighted crank, and he built a 76. I don't know what size jugs it was, but he built a 76 stroke. Okay, so we're going to talk about stroke here. The opening of the cylinders. Again, that costs money too, and maybe some of you guys don't have access to that. You should always see how this is right here. I can run my fingernail on that. This is a 40 horse case, but when I see that right there, okay, just get you up really close. That tells me this case probably needs a line bore. And whenever you see that sort of thing, things to look at, for line bore are that if this part's shiny right here, put the two case halves together, torque them down, make sure that you can not see daylight going through here. If you can see daylight, the case is no good. But if it clamps down, you should get a line bore, because if it's worn here, then what happens is those two halves are not going to be lined up correctly, and your bearings can be loose in the case, and it's not going to last. So you really should almost all the time get a line bore in your case. So you're going to have to do some machine work somewhere. Hopefully you can find somebody to do that. If it's a 40 horse case like this one, cam bearings are pretty much a must, and then you're also going to have to open up the cylinders, at least for 1600. At least that's usually what I do on a 40 horse. I will do cam bearings, line bore, and open these up for 1600. On my engine, on this one, I've gone to this 40 horse case because it was 8 millimeter studs. I opened it up for 90.5, but that's a rare situation. Rarely ever are you ever going to find a 40 horse case with 8 millimeter studs. Is just really rare. So how big can you go? Now that's going to depend on a couple things. So my buddy took a 76 and he put it in 3 different cases with rods on it. Okay, and all he had to do was do the same thing we've done with the 74, which is take one of these tools here and grind about right in here at that angle and take off about 2 millimeters or 3 millimeters of material. That's it. Okay, and that's all he had to do for the 74. Let's say it might be 5 millimeters of material that you have to take off if you're doing a 1600 opening. So if you're doing a 88 thick walls, you might take a little bit more off of here. You can imagine if that hole's bigger, you're gonna have to take less off. So if you go to a 90.5 opening, you might have to take very much at all off. You might have to take off a millimeter or something like that. It might be nothing hardly. And if you go to a 94, you might not have to do anything with the 74. So with the 76, he put it in and mocked it up. And again, that's how you do this, is you put it together. You put the crankshaft together like this. So there's no gear on it. No gear. You just put the rods on, oil them, put them on, put on the main bearings. You set the main bearings on here. You put it in one half of the case. Make sure that the pins are lined up and dropped all the way in, and then rotate it with the rod in the position where it would be if it was connected to the piston. So don't have the rod way up here. You want it very much in the middle so that it's going in the same position. So sometimes guys will have the rods hanging way over like this, and then they'll go, oh, I got to take more off, and they didn't need to take that much off. So put the rods in the correct position, hold them, run them around slowly, and make sure that it doesn't hit. You should do this with every one, even a 74. As far as I'm aware of, in any dual relief case, 74 should drop right in and not need any other places to machine other than these 4 areas. But again, you should always check it. So 74 is free game, free money. Easiest power up ever. When you got the engine apart, just put a 74 crank in and clearanced rods. Okay, clearanced 5325 or 54. I also think you can do 5 and B pistons. There's a lot of options, but just stick with the basics. I say is go 5325 rods and A pistons. A pistons are a little cheaper than B's, so I like to do it that way. The crankshafts for those are you can get them at Carcraft or CB Performance has theirs. A little bit different crankshaft, but they have them too. They have 74, 76 is a little bit more money. 78.4 is another option we're going to talk about. So a lot of guys, normally when you put in a 78 crank, you have to get your case machined. And what they do is they take it to the mill and they grind off some of these in an area. They'll grind off a couple of this area here. They'll take this down maybe a little bit right here. And they'll put like a little bit right here and here. You'll see on all of them, they grind an area away right here, up in here, and then part of these little ribs. Okay, when you get your case, and then partly down here, they'll take some of these ribs away when you take it to the machine shop and have it done. Okay, but do you need to do that for even a 78.4? Now, this becomes where are you willing to do a little bit of the work? The tools you might need, and you might not need them, is this. One of these, they got these on Amazon. This is a Win. I've had great luck with this thing. It works great. It's cheap, like 40 bucks-ish. And then a nice carbide tipped, one of these die grinder. You can even use a drill with one of those die grinder ends on it. That would do the job too. You're talking about magnesium. It's very soft material, comes off real easy. One of the trick things that you do is if you're using one of these, put some WD-40 on the tip every few minutes. You just put a little on there and it'll fling all the stuff off it. Make sure you're wearing goggles. That stuff's going to go everywhere. So yeah, make sure you got your eye protection on. In DIY. So 78.4. One of my friends right now is putting together a 78.4 and he is not getting the case opened up. Nope. He's doing it himself. So he told me that all he's had to do so far is a little bit right here, just like you do with a 74 or 76. All he's done is a little bit right here, and it hit one other place when he rotated it. It got a little kissy on the counterweights hit somewhere. So what do? You use this, you rotate it around, find out where it's hitting, take your Sharpie, mark it, okay, so you know where it's at. Take your crankshaft out, pop your bearings out. You don't want to get metal shavings on that stuff. Pop your bearings out and then use whatever you can get in there. If you can't get this tool in there, you should be able to get this one in there with a heavy grit sandpaper, and you just grind away, you know, a millimeter at a time. Make sure, remember, this is not that thick up here, but you can take quite a bit off of it. You'd be surprised how much you can get off there. 1/16 or 2 is probably all you're going to need, you know, to take off of any of this. That's it. So you might say to me, Mike, why a 78.4? Why not just a 78 with Volkswagen journals? Okay, so what is a 78.4 typically? And I don't know if they make them any other way, but the reason they used to make a 78.4, we'll go over the history so you kind of understand what the 78.4 is. 78.4. This is a 40 horse crank, I know, okay, but it's one that I've got that doesn't have a rod on it. And then I can kind of go over what they would do. So back in the early days, before you could buy a counterweighted crank, what they did is they took a stock crank, which is like this one here. This is a 1600 crank. The other one's 40 horse. They took this stock crank, and what they do is they would take a brand new stock crank and they would leave this portion of the journal on the rod where it is. And they would grind with a crank grinding machine everything off of this side. Okay, it's called offset grinding. And what they do is they grind off everything over here and make the circumference a little bit smaller. So then what they do is they found out that Chevy rods share the same width. I think that's what I understand about it. I've never done this before. I'm just telling you what I've learned from other people. So the Chevy rod had the same width, or maybe it was a slightly different, and they, made this machined out correctly for the Chevy rod. And what they did is the Chevy rod has a smaller journal, okay? And what they did is they would offset grind it. So this part of the rod was kept in the same place, okay? And all the grinding was done off of this side, okay? And what that did is it would offset it, grind it, and they found out that 78.4, that's why they used the 78.4, not 78. 78.4 was the furthest they could do it by not touching this edge. They kept this factory and then took everything off that circle, to make the circle smaller. They took it all off of this side by offset grinding it. They could get a 78 stroke out of a stock crankshaft. That's why that they came up with the 78.4. It was like one of the first big mods in the VW world. And then what they do is they would weld on counterweights. So they'd made these counterweights that they put on, and they'd weld them onto the crankshaft before they did that, because of the warpage and all that. They'd weld the counterweights on there, and then after it was all done, they'd balance it. So that's where the 78.4 came from. Why the 78.4 for stroker instead of just a plain 78? I don't know how much difference it is, but I think it's a little tiny bit less, okay? Because it's offset ground and the journal is a little bit smaller, there's the more clearance in there, so you have less clearancing to do. So with a 78.4, you can put it in, buy the bearings and everything, put it in your stock case, rotate it around, and do the same thing you do with a 74, but of course, you might end up using this tool. Because this thing gets in there and you can grind on it straight on, just grind away, take away a bunch of it, take away a bunch here, a bunch here. This tool here is you're going to have trouble trying to get it in there. See what I'm saying? It no worky. Trying to get it in there, you can have a little trouble. Trying to get in there to get the right angle. You can be hitting there where this nice, wonderful belt sander with a nice heavy grit on it, you can just get in here and just take away what you need. Works real nice and do the job. Now, just remember, if you go big like this, bigger, and you don't shuffle pin the center main, it's gonna wear the case a little bit faster than if you shuffle pin the center main. The shuffle pin in the center main will make this thing, even the 78 last quite a long time. So keep that in mind. But if you just want bigger, just to go faster and have fun or whatever, that's the way that you can do it. So you can go up to a 78.4 as long as it has the Chevy journals on it. They're a little bit smaller. That's the trick of how the guys are going 86 with is to go up to an 86. Back in the old days with the stock case, literally we had to weld on a little piece, if I remember right, somewhere in here. I can't remember. I never did one. I just seen them before. the guys that did them. And your crankshaft would go all the way up through the case. And in order to go that big, you had to also go with the Chevy rod journal sizes. So to get the rods just a little bit smaller, because a smaller rod will have a little bit more clearance. Now, I'm not sure on the cam if you need a clearance cam. I don't think you do with the 78. I don't think you do, but I'm not certain on that. So again, you might want to put your cam in when you're doing that, mock it up. You don't need to have the cam gear on the crankshaft. You can have the cam gear here and just rotate it around and just see how close it comes to the cam. Make sure it doesn't hit. That's another thing you need to do whenever you go stroker on something like that. And so those are just a couple of pointers you guys can do. If you wanted to go bigger, and you didn't want to have the case machined out, you can go up to a 78.4. 76, I think almost any case, there's going to be a couple that it might not work on. It might not work on a 40 horse. It might not work on a single relief. But as far as I know, guys that I've talked to, a few different guys, and I know a friend of mine, he tried a 76 in a couple of different cases, and it cleared on both of them the same as the 74. So the 76 can go right in, most of them, without too much work. The 78.4, it really isn't that much to do that either. You can just, again, this tool right here, you might have to clean a little bit here on those, maybe a little bit here, a couple little areas depending on the case that you're using, and you can put the bigger crank in it. So simple grinding. It's not hard to do. If you guys want to do it, you can do it. I'm just telling you what I've heard from other guys. I haven't done this myself, and again, even if we did it once, it might be different on a different case, just so you know. All right, I'll talk to you guys in the next video. Please like, share, and subscribe, and see your comments.